Welcome back to Souhan Unfiltered. This is Jim Souhan. We are on live at SOUHAN-UNFILTERED.com. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you figured out how to find the podcast, but just for the sake of the record, you can find all the podcasts at SOUHAN-UNFILTERED.com. And soon,
can you hear this, by the way?
Yeah, and that's Michael Russo. We used to, we have gone through the process of trying to find intro and outro music, but I think, Russo, for our podcast, should just be you stirring coffee into the microphone. I think
it's a protein
That's
shake.
all we need. Oh, it's a protein shake.
Yeah, like most sports writers, I'm drinking a protein shake.
There's protein in beer.
Yeah. Is that annoying to you hearing this?
It's fascinating to me that you find it this interesting, really, more than anything.
What's
the deal with protein shake?
Huh?
What's the deal with the protein shake?
It's my, I'm a, as everybody knows that sees me, I'm a huge weightlifter, and I'm just trying to that's what I've been doing all morning, is lifting weights here, and I'm just trying to replenish the protein, isn't that?
When I look at you, you know what I think?
Yeah.
I think more electrolytes.
Okay.
Electrolytes are the
No,
key thing.
it's my never-ending quest to lose weight. I'm on protein shake diet.
That's Michael Russo, Star Tribune hockey writer and man about town. I'm Jim Souhan, Minneapolis Star Tribune columnist. This is our podcast. We're in the press box at the XL Energy Center. The Wild have had the morning skate. Tonight they'll be taking on the Toronto Maple Loafs. And, Michael, we're going to get to a lot of different things, including some New Year's Eve talk and some New Year's resolutions and some general sports and some Twitter questions. But what's wrong with your hockey team?
Boy, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, well, it's only an hour show, so keep it short this time.
Yeah, I know. What's wrong with the hockey team? I don't know. I mean, they're just not not very good right now. I mean, it's unbelievable. You watch some of these games and how they're the same script every single game. I think 9 of the last 11 losses, if you take out the empty net goal, have been 1-goal losses, which just shows you that they're a team that's just not capable of either making the final play to score a goal, making the big play, or just making the big play to keep it out of their net. And they just do little things that always seem to cost them in games. And when you're not a confident team, it just kills you. And the latest example is Columbus. They're a team. As bad as Mike Yeo ripped them after the game, I didn't think that they were that bad at all in the first two periods. And if they get out of that period up 1-0, I think they win that hockey game. But it was almost just so typical of everything that's going on here. Not only do they make a mistake in the final minute of the second to tie things up, but it's Darcy Kemper, who is playing so well in that game, that made the mistake. Makes a great save on Matt Calvert between the circles to rob them of the tying goal, but in the process loses his stick when Christian Folin puts it out of harm's way. And then instead of just waiting until that puck's out of the zone, he goes fishing for a stick, can't pick it up, and boom, they score. So here's a goalie that's that a lot very maligned lately, had just pretty much in my mind won them a game in Winnipeg, and he makes one bad decision and just can't pick it up cleanly, and then boom, it's a tie game and everything changes. And we're just seeing that every night now. I mean, they're just guys that just make these key little mistakes at awful times in the game. And when your team is as fragile as the Wild is right now upstairs, it's just obviously it just kills you. And they're being killed right now. I mean, this is just they seem to be treading water for now a month and a half. And it just is only going to get harder. I'm not very confident about their chances. I would say last year this time I wasn't very confident either. But I don't know. This just seems like a totally different feel. Maybe it's because we're living in it now, but it just seems like this team, is just not very good right now.
Let's go big picture here. Before they acquired Parisi and Suter, it was just kind of a mediocre hockey team, and they had to play above their heads to win. Then they get Parisi and Suter, and they start getting better, obviously. You're going to get better immediately when you bring in those guys. And a lot of Fletcher's moves started paying off. Some of the young talent started emerging. But really, the only thing that's been different about the Wild the last handful of years has been the fact that they made the rally late last year to get in the playoffs, and they won a playoff series. So my question is that kind of 2-month period of time, is that the aberration, or is that what we should expect?
Well, I think that this should be an eye-opener to everybody in the organization that this team is not ready yet to make that next step. I don't think this sample size is an aberration either, whether or not last year was or not. I will say that if I'm an owner of a team that's paying the type of money that they have for these players, two things would concern me. One, that nothing has changed. They're still scratching every year for 8th. And two, that basically that this is what it is. I mean, that this is, if you don't do it now, well, Parisi and Suter are only getting older. So when is the window shrinking? And the problem with that is that you can't just accelerate the young kids to being, finished products right now. I mean, young kids are young for a reason, and you get these type of idiosyncrasies, these inconsistencies and things like that on the ice. We're seeing, Coyle and Nino. Nino, one of the brightest spots of the season, has been one of the worst players the last 9 or 10 games. Coyle's been, not only inconsistent all year, but inconsistent in games, where he'll go 2-3 great shifts in a row and then give you just 2 or 3 just what just happened shifts. Holla. Mike Yeo admitting that he came into camp out of shape and that that's a never-ending question, tried to get him into shape. Things like that. And so when these guys, like, Charlie Coyle was the 28th pick in the draft for a reason. He wasn't a top guy back then.
He's never been a big scorer.
Right. And so, my thing is that, they have good kids, but they're still not Patrick Kane and Jonathan Taves and,
right.
Those type of things. So that should be a concern. There's no doubt is that, even when they hit their peak, what's that going to be? So, I mean, there's just not a lot of easy answers right now, if you're Chuck Fletcher. And that's why I think that from bigger picture standpoint, as much as everybody wants to throw the heat on Mike Yeo and all that things, I mean, this better be a season of analyzing. And it's not over yet, but this has to be a season that they make some real honest appraisals of what they've got here. And if you're, not going to be able to jumpstart it to a point that's actually going to contend for a cup, which is why they're all in this, then they're going to have to figure out ways to turn this thing around, big picture with big shakeups. And that's not easy when you've already, committed to some kids long term and you've committed to a lot of veterans long term, which means that they're almost unmovable, that type of thing. I mean, they better hope they haven't made some big time mistakes here.
Holla really fascinates me.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a guy who comes on late last year, energizes this team with the speed, really help them get into the playoffs, help them be dangerous in the playoffs. He's a smaller player who relies on speed and finally got his break. And this is his first full year in the NHL. I can't believe that a guy like that wouldn't come in shape. That shocks me, or wouldn't get into shape.
Yeah, I mean, I just think there's probably a difference between shape for me and shape for him. I don't think he came in fat by any stretch, but there is a difference. I think this is not too. I mean, we saw this with Cal Clutterbuck all the time. We saw this with Guillaume Latendresse, and now we're seeing with Eric Holla. I think there's just a difference when you're a young kid of the commitment level that you put in when you have immediately, a strong first year. And, maybe he's got to stick, I know he sticks around here, but, maybe he's got to work, totally with Kirk Olsen next summer and things like that. But I just, I guess my point is that I think that sometimes, he had such success last year in the playoffs that you think it's going to, everything, about this year is going to come easier. And that is both your commitment off the ice to, to just the way that you're going to play. I think that things probably came a little easier. And this is, kind of the second year, downward that you see. I hate the term sophomore slump, but I mean, that's what we're seeing here. But I don't think, I think sophomore slumps aren't just, on the ice. I think that it's everything around it. And I think that's a big reason is when you have that first big year that all of a sudden you just don't, maybe the commitment level isn't exactly the same here. So I think that's probably emblematic of what we're seeing right now with Eric Holla. The good news is that he wants to be great. And I think this will be a wake-up call to him where he's going to commit more, off the ice probably next, not just now, but next summer. And, I think this is just a learning lesson that we see with a young kid. And, he is 23, 24. He's not like, even Granlund or Brodin or Coyle from that standpoint. Even Nino, this is an older guy. But I just think that, he'll be fine. But this is, subtly the other day in Columbus, Mike Yeo mentioned it. And I didn't follow up on it, but it was kind of, it was just in there, just listening. You heard it back on tape, and you can see that it was an unsolicited. This will be good for him to work on his conditioning. When a coach says that, something else is brewing behind the scenes that he probably wanted to get out there. so fans don't think he's completely out of his mind for pulling, the great former Gopher out of the lineup. And he definitely let it be known today, which is, could be a little also. I mean, it's going to be embarrassing for Eric to everybody to see this,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this will be definitely more of a message being sent to a young kid here.
What do you think is going through the minds of Leopold and Fletcher at this point?
Well, I can't imagine that Fletcher is very happy, but I think he's got to be concerned about the team that he's put on the ice. From a Leopold standpoint, let's put it this way. Last year at this time, I was writing the coach's job was on the line pretty much every second.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because
I remember.
And it was because it was.
Yeah.
And this year, I'm not writing the coach's job is on the line every second because, I'm pretty confident it's not. Unless all of a sudden Chuck Fletcher decides, hey, this team I put together really is outstanding and the coach's voice is not being heard and it's him making the decision. But from Craig's standpoint, I don't and I have, a good amount of communication with the owner, which is, very different than a lot of sports writers would have with owners and other organizations.
Oh, man, you should have seen me and Ziggy on New Year's Eve popping the corks.
Exactly.
Man.
I mean, that's the one thing about Craig is that he's just accessible to the media, and so you're able to gauge the owner's panic level a lot more than maybe if you were a sports writer for another team. Just because this is his full-time job, basically. I'm confident that unless something's changed in the last 48 hours, that he is not blaming this on Yo at all right now. I mean, he's not happy. He's a fan. He's also one that's spending a ton of money on this product and wants them more than anybody to win a cup. And he can't be happy with what he's seeing right now. But I think that he, feels that this is not a Mike Yeo thing. I think he totally, maybe after seeing the way that this team has played under Mike, when it's running on all cylinders, believes that he's a very good coach. And so, it's all going to sound like excuses, but this is a team that's just not getting the great goaltending right now. Defensively, they haven't been nearly as sharp. And they're also a team that just I hate to keep on saying it because fans don't want to hear this, but they've been a really sick team. I'm not even making the injury excuse. I mean, this team is just it's just every day it's somebody else, and it's not just Brett Sutter's missing tonight's game, but it's not just Brett being sick. It's this thing is affecting everybody. And so I just think that you just see it on the ice the last month and a half that they're not exactly a healthy, fully energized team.
Well, I tell you what, I got sick the last weekend, and for about 5 days, I had trouble moving.
Yeah.
I can't imagine playing hockey when
Well,
you're sick.
just think of Darcy Kemper lost 8 pounds. Jason Zucker lost 9. I don't know where they're losing this weight
these are
because
skinny guys.
I joked today that I would give anything for the norovirus next week. We're in town for a week. I could stand to lose 8-9 pounds. That'd be nice.
You write a weight loss book.
Exactly.
Spoiler alert here. I sense in my conversations with you that you sense that the owner that we're talking about, Craig Leopold, might not be thrilled when he sees a lot of Winnipeg jerseys in the stands.
Oh, yeah. I don't think he is. I think that he'd like to see more Wild fans here. And I think the organization is a little concerned with the April 6th game, the Jets game, last home game of the Wild season, and if that game is, say, a must-win game, that all of a sudden, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 Winnipeg fans start driving down here. So I think they're starting to at least discuss ways, to maybe kind of start to limit that. But and a lot of organizations have done that. I mean, the Nashville Predators last year forced fans that wanted to go to one of 3 Chicago games that they had to buy 2 tickets. The St. Louis Blues forced the same thing. St. Louis Blues saw that and said, you know what? How about 2 extra games you got to buy for if you want to go to any of the Chicago games? And the Miami Dolphins have done this for years against the Patriots. I remember when I was down there, and so that's something they're thinking about, but they really haven't really discussed it overly seriously yet. And it's probably at this late a juncture tough to get the mechanisms in place to make sure that certain zip codes can't buy tickets and things like that. And it's also it's impossible to shut them all out in today's day and age because between StubHub and season ticket holders selling their own tickets either privately or through secondary markets, it's very tough. But I don't think that they want to have. I think they were very upset when all of a sudden Andrew Ladd scored that overtime goal the other day when the Jumbotron showed about 1,000 Winnipeg fans in their lower bowl with beers in their hand just sitting there literally laughing at Wild fans. I think they don't want to be embarrassed. But I will say this, and I talked to Matt Maka, the COO, and I'm doing my Sunday column on this subject for this Sunday. I talked to Matt Maka just literally 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago about this, and he says that, he wants to be an organization that's a lot more confident in itself than to worry about whether or not a bunch of fans are flooding their arena. But he also, and he openly admitted, he loves what the Jets fans bring to this game. They help energize their crowd, even starting in the national anthem when they're in the middle of the anthem screaming True North, which is the owner. That's what they do there because that's the owners of the Winnipeg Jets that brought that franchise from Atlanta to Winnipeg, and so he loves that it gets the Wild fans up and at him, and maybe that isn't a bad thing, but it is something that the Wild fans are the Wild organization is starting to get a little wary of these guys coming down here, and want to also get this team to a point on the ice where it makes sure that their own fans are the ones that are gobbling up their ticket, and that's not something that you can really do in the business ops of this organization. That's something that has to be done within that locker room.
All you really have to do is just have a spelling test at the entrance. If they spell offense with a C or color with an extra U or something, then it costs you an extra $50 to get in. I think it's very simple.
Center, S-E-N-T-R-E.
Center, yes. We will get back to hockey talk momentarily. Let's go a little more general here for a moment, though. What's a fabulous hockey writer like yourself? How do you celebrate New Year's Eve?
It was pretty depressing this New Year's. First time I've been on the road since I've been the beat writer because the Wild usually have that game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left the Nationwide Arena around probably 11:40, and it was 20 minutes left. And first of all, it was like bitterly cold. In my walk back to the hotel, it was like it had to be single digits. At least it felt that way. And so I got back to the hotel like shortly before midnight. And I put on CNN. I was kind of taking off the tie to go out to the bars. And I got a text message from a friend of mine that said that it was absolutely packed at this like one bar. And it's like 11:50 at this point. I was just like, what? It's just I'm not in the mood to after sitting there and writing another crummy game story on the same game story that I've written basically the last month and a half, and having no energy to do that. It's like putting lipstick on a pig at this point. It's just the same story every single night with this team. I just stayed in my hotel room. It was so depressing.
Didn't you have a coffee at 11:59?
Yeah, no, it was
bubbly
honestly,
coffee.
I put on CNN and then I put on ABC and just watched Nico and Vince and One Direction, and who else was on that? Fergie was hosting it. And I'm not. Everybody knows I'm not a Black Eyed Peas fan.
You're depressing the hell out of me.
Yeah, I know.
Right
It was Nico and Vince and
last week all we talked about is you going on around the country with counting crows and being in Europe and all your fabulous. And now you're talking about doing
Columbus
nothing.
Courtyard Marriott watching New Year's Eve alone. It was brutal.
God.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can bounce back from that.
Yeah.
You want to revive us? Last week you told us 8 embarrassing stories about yourself. Do you have any left? We might have told them all.
Yeah. I don't know. Let me think about that. I could probably go back and think about all my high school stories. I'm sure I have a ton of. I was telling Anthony LaPantis recently. I spent Christmas Eve at Anthony LaPantis' house, and Anthony's son Vinny is going into the Navy SEALs. He's going to be a Navy SEAL, and there was another guy there that was 25 years old that's fully into being a bud. He's in San Diego, and he's telling me unbelievable stories about what these guys are put through. And then I started telling about my when I used to try out for high school football, and they'd make me do a dash, and I'd be by the garbage cans just hurling and things like that. I'm that's the difference between you guys and me, is that I do a shuttle sprint and throw up immediately after, and these guys are absolutely, it's unbelievable the stories of what it takes to become a Navy SEAL.
I've read about them.
It is, honestly, it is, they beat you up to bring you back, and it is, this one kid's class had 100-something in it. It's down to 50 because how many people quit. In the hell weeks he is physically scarred all over his body, and he's telling these unbelievable stories, and Vinny's eyes are just wide open. I'm just this is ridiculous. This kid cannot wait to get his ass kicked.
Here's the problem, though. Your last name's LaPanta. You become a Navy SEAL. You're out on some special black ops. With radio silence, you're skulking through somebody's backyard, or And then you use a Lapanta voice. I mean, everybody in the country would know you're there.
Yeah.
Anthony has no mute button.
I don't know if Anthony could do it.
I don't think
Vinny's
Anthony
definitely
could do
doing it. I mean, there's the way this kid trains. He gets up every day at 6 a.m. and goes down to swimming pools, and he'll sit there in the bottom of a pool for like 5 minutes holding his breath, and with somebody down there basically going to save his life if he passes out. And
God bless him.
And he's telling stories about how today I had a great workout for the first time. I didn't pass out today, and I'm just like, oh my God. This is,
you know what?
Thank God we have people like
No
Vinny and this kid's, I think his name was Matt Nichols, the other guy, that are willing to do this for
Absolutely.
our country. I mean, honestly, and you realize when you listen to these guys talk and why they want to do it and how noble it is and to be in the military, and then you think, all right, I am the most weak human being ever. I'm just a lowly sports writer doing nothing great for this world.
Michael, we're not just weak. We're also weak and pampered.
Yeah,
I mean, let's put it in perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
But I bet, you know what? He can't slam a protein shake like
No,
you can.
I pounded that thing.
That was awesome.
Yep, it's gone.
Let's go a little big picture here with sports. Again, we'll get back to hockey in a minute here. You've covered sports around the country. You were in the Miami market. You saw some really good University of Miami teams. Mm. Obviously, Florida is basically the home of college football in a lot of ways. So I want your perspective on Gopher football. Because they've energized their base. They've gone to a New Year's Day bowl game. They have played meaningful games in November. Jerry Kill has become a beloved figure in town. They've accomplished a lot the last 2 years. But give me a national perspective. Are you impressed by this, or is this just a pretty good college football team?
Well, I mean, I think they're a pretty good college football team, but I think that what they're building there is impressive, and I just think that it doesn't happen overnight. I think that Jerry Kill, it takes. I mean, didn't he come in and say it's going to take 5, 6, 7 years? And I think he's ahead of that schedule. But you're trying to compete with the Michigans of the world and the Ohio States and the Iowas, and they had a couple huge wins this year. And but you go down there and I watched a little bit of the game yesterday, and that thing could have kind of reminded me of the Wild. I mean, if you just did this or this or this, it would have been a totally different football game. And so, I just think it's the start of something, but it takes a while. And unfortunately, in Minnesota, I think all of us are skeptical about, when you see a team that's, all right, there are some good steps. Are they ever going to get that point over the hump? And, so I just think that it's one of those things where it's going to be a bit of time. I mean, I covered a couple great football teams back in my day. I mean, 92, I was at the University of Florida. Shane Matthews, Steve Spurrier, who's just a jerk. And
He's a wacky jerk, though.
Yeah. And then in 93, I mean, I was right there when the Knowles won it all. And seeing Bobby Bowden, who's total different personality at the time than Steve Spurrier, and seeing the Charlie Wards and the work done, and just how incredible of a machine that FSU team is. It is, to get to that pinnacle, man, it is tough work. And it takes a while, and if you consider that this isn't like a professional team, I mean, they lose their kids. So it all starts with recruiting. And, that's what you hope, I think, if you're a Gopher fan, is that just that appearance in the Citrus Bowl, playing an SEC, a great SEC team like Mizzou, your team, right? Well,
yeah. Well, it's interesting. This was the SOUHAN Bowl because I went to Missouri. My youngest is going to Missouri right now, and I have 2 daughters who graduated from the University of Minnesota.
Right. And I just think that, that's the type of thing that could help you now in your next recruiting class. And that's what it all comes down to, is making sure that you recruit great kids. And you lose a Max Williams today, but you have a couple other tight ends coming, and, that type of thing. And so this can only help, I think, in the long run, than just another, crappy year in a crappy bowl game.
What's worrisome, and this doesn't take a lot of great insight here, but what is worrisome if you care about the Gopher football program is, they go 5-3 in a year where Michigan's terrible.
Yeah.
They catch Iowa at the right time. They had a very good year, and the Big Ten seemed to be fairly vulnerable.
Yeah.
At least their schedule ended up being easier than we all thought it was going to be going into the year.
Yeah.
And now you got Harbaugh going to Michigan. You have Urban Meyer poised to maybe win a national championship, and he has it rolling. And his third quarterback might be the third best quarterback in the league. I think Mike Riley will do very well at Nebraska. I think Paul Chryst will do great at Wisconsin. It's a little daunting now to go 5-3 going forward is going to be harder than it was this year, I believe.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Wild and the Central and all these.
Yeah, very true.
It is. The Urban Meyer story is a great story in itself. I mean, when you consider that this guy basically quit Florida because he thought he was going to drop dead any second, and then he winds up taking the job in Ohio, taking this job, and now all of a sudden he might be on the verge, as you said, of winning a national championship
with his third quarterback.
Yeah, I know.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. So
you know what struck me about the game last night?
I didn't realize, by the way, that the Gophers were 5-3. I didn't realize
in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they went winning, and they have 8-4 overall or whatever, 8-5 overall, I guess. We're all accustomed to the violence of football. You watch the NFL, you see it every weekend. But I tell you what, the Ohio State-Alabama game last night, the level of violence, the level of hitting, the level of determination from those players. I mean, you're this third-string quarterback. They probably, I'm guessing their fourth-string quarterback isn't as good as their third-string quarterback. That's just a guess. And he's playing in the biggest game of his life, and he's running over Alabama defenders. I thought one of the turning points of the game was Jones takes off down the middle, his first big run. There are 3 Alabama defenders kind of lining him up, looking to take him apart, and he hurdles one and runs over another. I thought from that point on, Ohio State looked unstoppable.
By the way, I was at the Columbus airport the other day, and I landed, and I of course, stopped at Starbucks.
Of course.
And Chuck Fletcher, by the way.
Starbucks should sponsor this show, by the way.
Chuck, we should get on that, actually.
Absolutely.
Actually, I know a couple of mom-and-pop coffee shops in the area that we can get
there you go.
Maybe talk to. So Chuck was on my plane the other day, by the way, connecting. I was connecting from Winnipeg. He didn't go on that trip, so he got on my plane. He gets on the plane, and he looks at me, and he just turned around and walked right off as a joke. And then he found out that he was right next to me, which was very exciting for me.
So anyway, but
I was walking towards Starbucks at the Columbus airport there, and right at the end of the terminal is right in front of security is where that Starbucks is, and all of a sudden I'm looking, and the entire gate is filled with Ohio State fans, and I just looked around the corner, heading to New Orleans. Yeah,
yep.
It was unbelievable. There was not one person getting on that plane that wasn't wearing red and white. It was crazy.
Yeah, it's
reminded me of this awful time. I had to fly to Knoxville to cover a preseason game, Florida versus the Nashville Predators in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm getting on my connection at 6 a.m. the next morning to go through Atlanta to go home, and Tennessee was going to play the Gators. So the entire flight at 6 a.m. were people dressed in orange singing Tennessee songs. It was honestly, it might have been the worst experience I've ever had in my life. If I could have pulled the emergency exit, I would have just absolutely jumped out of that aircraft because it was like mercy enough. Like, it is 6 a.m. and I'm got to listen to this stuff.
That's another fascinating thing, and another aspect of the Gopher program I wanted to get into you with is most college football powerhouses are cults.
Yeah.
And they're massive cults. I mean, there are people who every piece of clothing they wear is school colors, where their whole year revolves around those 6 home games or 7 home games, wherever it is. And it's just always going to be different here.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. It means that you live in a place where there are other options. There are other sports. There are other entertainment venues. But I just, as beloved as Jerry is and as much progress as this program has made, they still don't sell out a 45,000-seat stadium.
I think that is always going to be tough. I mean, this isn't Gainesville. This isn't Tallahassee. That is the capital. I mean, this isn't Columbus. This isn't Knoxville. I mean, it's, you have those communities that are entrenched. I mean, the Blue Jackets will always be second fiddle to Ohio State and Columbus no matter what. But it does seem like it's trending the right way. I mean, just reading all the coverage by Joe in our paper, they did a great job of, getting, selling more tickets and getting, I mean, it's not tough to get, I think people get to go to Orlando in the middle of, December, early January to go down to Orlando and see a football game. But, it's got to continue. I mean, it's just a tough thing. I mean, you're right. I mean, they're in the Big Ten and they're, in the middle of a metropolitan, area. So it is always going to be tough to, obviously it seems tough to get the student body to embrace everything right now. So it's just going to be one of those things they're going to have to continue to work on. But, if Jerry Kill, didn't want that. He's had other opportunities to leave here. Go to, he could have gone to Nebraska if he wanted to deal with something like that.
Right. But don't worry about the student body. Mark Dayton is going to make sure there are no more 11 a.m. kickoffs, and that'll solve the whole problem right there. Let's get into a few Twitter questions. A lot of these would be hockey based here. From Ion Vandy on Twitter, explanation of the Wild's view of Blum compared to Falk, Bickle, and Folan.
I mean, they just don't seem to have a ton of confidence in him right now. I mean, every time we've seen him up here, he just his one game that he played in Jersey, very so-so. Fans don't have a chance to see a lot of the road preseason games, but he played that game in Winnipeg this year, and he played the game in Winnipeg last year, and he was just bad in those games. And those are the things that Yo sees, and it's always going to be tougher, I think, as for an organization to have a lot of faith in you if your coach doesn't sees holes in your game. Brett Sutter had a very mediocre training camp, and it took him a while to get up here, and it's been the same thing with John Blum. So they don't seem to love him, that's for sure. I thought that he played really well down the stretch and gave him some tough top games, but I think that they see a lot of the and he's such a great guy, but I think they see a lot of the issues that maybe Nashville did at the end from a compete standpoint and things like that. He's kind of like an in-between player. He's not very physical. He's not very offensive. He's defensively has holes, and sometimes if you're going to be in that situation, you much rather have, say, even though he's erratic, the Nate Prossers of the world, who at least is going to get in guys' faces and things like that.
Also from Ion Vandy.
Ion Vandy, he's a very loyal Twitter follower.
Yeah, I've noticed
that. He asks some great questions, definitely questions sometimes that I'd love to respond to, but can't publicly on Twitter because it'll just blow up and become. But he's very astute.
So you'll respond on the podcast, and the podcast will blow up. That's okay with me. Has Craig Leopold given Chuck Fletcher the budget and cash flow to spend up to the cap the rest of the season with acquisitions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if let's put it this way, if Chuck Fletcher wanted to trade for Cam Ward right now at $6.3 million, he'd be allowed to.
Should he?
Depends what you have to give up. I mean, if you can get him for Justin Fontaine, I'd do it. But if you got to trade one of your young studs, I absolutely not. So again, and the reason why I say this is because I'm not confident that a goaltender is going to solve all the Wild's issue and get them in the playoffs. They've dug themselves a hole here. But two, Ward, he's been injury prone. He is 30. And so if all of a sudden, you decide that he's not your goalie that you can re-sign to a long-term deal, then you've got to figure out who that goalie is going to be. Is it Kemper or is it going to be somebody else? So they've got to make that long-term decision. And just to make a knee-jerk last-second decision here because Cam Ward's a name, and then all of a sudden, it would be an absolute tragedy if you traded for him and a real significant player, and then all of a sudden, you're getting rid of him in a year.
I'm going to let you read this one off my phone screen here. This is from Brian. It's kind of an involved question about other players.
With these players, UFA, do the Wild still stand pat? Niemi, Martin, Green, Stahl, Johnny Boychuk, Chris Stewart, pay to win. Those guys are all going to be potentially available at the trade deadline, and I could see the Wild trying to make a move for any of those guys and then maybe re-signing them. I mean, I think this team badly needs a lefty, but that from a depth standpoint is where they need a lefty. That lefty is going to come in here and probably play where Prosser plays on the third pair. But I do think that they really lack a big right shot defenseman that is going to be offensive that can help the power play. That right there is Mike Green. Who are some of the other guys I mentioned? I mean, I could tell you that Chris Stewart's not somebody that they're overly in love with. Johnny Boychuk, that would be the right guy, but my guess is they'll figure out a way to keep him on Long Island. Niemi makes sense if he's eventually dealt with. I don't think that San Jose right now is looking to move him right now. And the reason why I say that is, they're still a team that I don't know if they're going to want to throw all their eggs in Stalock's basket. So, I think that he's the type of guy that you might have to wait to get in the offseason. And then the other name there is Paul Martin. I mean, the Wild need a lefty. Do you trade for him now, or do you just sign him in the offseason? Chuck Fletcher does have a long memory. Paul Martin had a chance to sign here during his last free agent contract, and the Wild thought they were getting him, and he basically used it to get a bigger deal in Pittsburgh, and the Wild weren't very happy about that whole thing because the way I understand is it cost him a couple other players by waiting on him. I mean, I don't know how true that is. That's one side of the story. So does Chuck Fletcher forgive and kiss and make up type thing. We'll see.
I did open it up on Twitter today asking for questions to be tweeted at us so I could ask Michael Russo. You can follow Michael at RussoStrib. I'm at SouHan-Strib. And one question came in asking, where do babies come from? You want to handle that or should I?
Yeah, you can take it.
I'll take that. I'll do that in a later, much more personal podcast. What exactly is Nino doing wrong defensively that is keeping him guaranteed top minutes?
He's a minus 13 on a team that's mostly pluses. So that tells you right there. I mean, he's just not. As physical a player as Nino is, his wall play has always been an issue, and you even saw it on the power play the other night. Like it was just. I think Nino's going to be a great player, but man, he's tough to throw in a first unit power play just because he's so soft with the puck along the boards at times. I mean, he throws pucks away the second he gets it, and it just I don't know. I mean, it's hard to you got to watch it, but his attention to detail at times is pretty bad. He loses guys, and so Mike Yeo doesn't feel that he can put him up against top defensemen. So he tries to put him on second and third, unit lines to basically get him out there so he could take advantage of third defense pairs and things like that. Where he's great is going to the net. The other thing that's bizarre about Nino lately is he just doesn't seem to be using his shot. I mean, he scored 2 massive goals, if I remember, in Game 7 of the first round that won them that game. One in overtime and one that tied the game in the third period before Spurgeon tied the game.
Yep.
And both were the same shot coming down the wing, and there have been 3 or 4 times in the last couple of weeks where he's coming down the wing that it's like he's just not shooting. And this is a guy that's made, at the very least, made Semyon Varlamov look beatable, but with his incredible shot off the wing. So he's just got to get back to that. I can tell you he's another guy from talking to him. He cares, man. I mean, he wants to be great, and I think he still has a chance. But again, this is a 22-year-old kid, and this is the stuff we're going to see. And this is just the way that coaches have to get trust in you. And if you're, Mike Yeo, I get this, some guy. This guy that I've actually muted on Twitter because he drives me crazy.
I love the mute button.
Called Mike Yeo ignorant today. And it's like, let me promise you, Mike Yeo sees things better than you do. Okay? And he knows his system much more than you do. And if the coach, and this is every coach in the league, does not have trust in certain players for certain reasons, they might not spell it out to all of us, but they have a reason. And the fact that Nino Niederreiter is a minus 13 right now, playing 14 minutes a night, probably is a good indication that Mike Yeo knew what he was talking about and why he's limiting his ice time. So I know. Look, I think the number one power play is so. I mean, the power play actually has been better lately, but it's been so bad. I don't have a problem with trying him out there as the net front guy instead of Vanek or Coyle by any stretch of the imagination. But on that second unit the other day. For what I remember something in New Jersey earlier this season. If you just look at his shifts on the power play the other night in Columbus, and I think it's going to be pretty obvious what some of the deficiencies are with Nino. But it'll get better. I mean, he's the good thing about all the Wilds kids is they all have immense pride. I mean, this isn't a good thing because I think it's the thing that's destroying Charlie Coyle's season. But the guy cares, man. He is. You go in the locker room and he wears his absolute lack of confidence right now on his face, and it's because he knows that he needs to be better and should be better, and unfortunately he's bringing it on the rink with him, and it's hurting this team that he has not taken that next step this year, if not regressed. But the fact that he works so hard off the ice and this is what's happening and you see it on his face, I think should give you hope that eventually he's going to turn it around. It's just got to happen, though.
I got a question. I'm going to interrupt the Twitter flow here for my own question. I covered baseball for a long time. I've covered the NFL for a long time. And the admonitions about gambling are all over that sport. It's their biggest fear that they'll be associated with gamblers. Why hasn't the Vanek story been a bigger deal in the hockey world?
It was at the time, but
it hasn't had legs though.
No, it hasn't had legs. Probably because it's in Minnesota. If this was Toronto or Montreal still or something like that, so it would have had absolute legs. But it's like we're not even in the league here at times in Minnesota. I mean, it's like how many times do we see a Wild player get hurt and it's not a big deal nationally, but if the same thing happened in Toronto, it would just explode. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the nature of the NHL rules. I mean, they say he's done nothing wrong. He wasn't charged with anything, and it was a football ring. So you're right, though. I mean, now I don't know. It probably should have had bigger legs. But it would seem to be like really swept under the rug here. Maybe that's why Vanek so badly wanted to come to Minnesota, get the heck out of New York and Montreal, because he knew this thing was going to come out. Yeah. I mean, you might as well not be in the league sometimes here.
From PM, actually, I want to get farther into that because I've been living here for 25 years or so now. And Minnesotans have always had that attitude. I mean, they held up the sign at the '87 World Series. We like it here. There's this pride, and yet this insecurity about living in Minnesota, being in flyover country. Do you really think that the NHL looks at this as an outpost?
Well, NBC does.
Yeah.
I mean, NBC refuses to give the league a game, the Wild and Winter Classic right now.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't really an NHL thing. This is a NBC making the decision there because they don't trust that the Wild would be able to sell nationally. But it has been that way, and I think the Wild, by going out and making that splash a couple of years ago, whether you agree with the move or wasn't, it was one way of trying to get onto the national landscape and things like that. But it does sometimes, as incredible of a hockey community as this is, and truly the state of hockey, when you look at the amount of not just a Wild invented marketing campaign, which it is, but when you look at the amount of kids that play youth hockey here compared to every other state in our country,
I've heard this is the state of hockey.
Yeah, it is, but it just doesn't seem to really transcend, and so I mean, there's. And, the Winter Classic thing bothers me because it's the same team every year. Yesterday's game, Washington and Chicago, both been multiple ones now. Boston's about to get a multiple, now. They were at Fenway. Now they're going to go back there, I'm pretty sure. It's to me ridiculous. So, but that's just the way that things are.
One piggyback question from Twitter, from PM on Twitter. How big a mistake was not sending Haula to Iowa?
Well, I think, it's easy to say in hindsight, and I know Mike Yeo is beating himself up about that. The way that it works is that Mike Yeo makes every coaching decision, lineup decision there is. Sometimes with guidance from management. Like, in other words, hey, just to let you know, if you play him this game, we're going to lose his waiver threshold, things like that. And, the way I understand it is that Mike Yeo was told, just to let you know, not sit him, but hey, just to let you know, if you play him now, you're stuck with Haula for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And that happened in Montreal when we were there earlier this season, and he decided to play him. And that did it. I mean, now if the Wild put Haula on waiver, 100% somebody's taking him, probably the Edmonton Oilers. And so they can't do it anymore. So it was a mistake, I think. I think all kids should get extended time in the minors.
You talk about Yo, and listen, every sports writer who covers every team, if the team struggles at all, even if they don't struggle, the coach is going to get second-guessed about something. Is there anything you see that Mike could be doing better or differently with this team?
Well, I think the lineup decisions. I think there have been some curious ones. I also, like last week, when he said that he was playing instead of Folin, he was playing Prosser for the veteran presence or something. I just don't get that.
Yeah.
I mean, Folin was coming off a pretty good game in Chicago, I think it was, and Prosser did not. And I just don't get the veteran presence whole thing there. And I think fans have pretty much picked up on the fact that if, let's put it this way, I don't think Thomas Vanek's in the greatest shape, but Mike Yeo hasn't come out and said anything about his conditioning. Yep. But he's more willing to say that about young kids and things like that. There's an interesting dynamic on this team. There's all these 21 and 22-year-olds, and there's all these 30 and 31-year-olds. And so, there's nothing in the middle, and suddenly you're dealing with egos and things like that. There is no doubt inside the organization that they have, and this could be as much Chuck Fletcher's fault as anybody's, but they have egos that they got to deal with. It's easy for media or fans to say, take Suter off the number one power play, put Scandella on there. But, But Suter's the guy here that, is the big money maker, and he's got 11 more years left on his contract. And, there's just all these things that it's easy for all of us to just say do it when you're Mike Yeo, to sit there and remove Ryan Suter from the power play is just easier said than done.
Yeah, because Suter might then turn around and fire Yeo right there.
Exactly. And you know what? I mean you know what? That what you said there, that's true.
I know, believe me.
Mike Yeo needs those two on his side. I mean, and Mikko Koivu. I mean, nothing happens in a vacuum when you have guys on long-term deals. And trust me, when Chuck Fletcher is making a decision last year, do I re-sign Mike Yeo to a 3-year contract? He's not doing that without first getting – it might not be saying, hey, Ryan, should we?
No, but he's reading the tea leaves.
But there are exit interviews that happen, and part of that exit interview, when he meets with Zach Parise for lunch or Mikko Koivu for lunch or Ryan Suter, is, so, on this facet of the team, what do you think? What's your ideas on this thing? And trust me, coaches, it's just, anything. It's like when we get our reviews at work, as great as those things are, they ask certain questions of us. So, I don't know. Don't they?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to bring up on the podcast that I rip you behind your back all the time.
I know.
But, it's kind of my job.
But there is this dynamic that is forced upon the coach here that, of these veterans, and we see it. I mean, how many times does that number one unit absolutely fail late in the game or on a 5-on-3, and, yet they're out there again the next time. Now, it's easy to say that's all on Mike, but it's not easy to, you throw all of a sudden, you're not playing – Parise, Koivu, Vanek, Suter, and Pominville late in the game in a must-win game, and you're throwing out there, Zucker, Coyle, Nino, and they all fail. Now you have a bigger dynamic issue going on in the organization as they can. And this team just has so many issues right now. It's unbelievable, which is what makes me so lack confidence of where they're going to go from here. I mean, it's just... between the illnesses and then the burden that Ryan Suter's carrying with just losing his dad and what Zach Parise is dealing with, I mean, his dad is in really bad shape right now, and there's just so many problems right now on this team that it really, I wrote about it last week, but I truly meant it. It's like you almost feel like it's not meant to be this season. It started early in training camp with the whole Vanek stuff, and then, and then their schedule was kind of made like, I mean, this is going to sound again like a stupid excuse and another one that's going to probably get me on a preposterous statements on Common Show, but you just look at their schedule and how stupid it was to begin with. They immediately played less games than everybody in the league for pretty much 3/4 of the year. So just even if optically you're behind in the standings, it's just going to bring that tension into the locker room where you're just always tense, and that was right from the beginning. They didn't play that first week. That they played 2 games, and they didn't play for 7 days, and they only played 8 or 9 games in October. And it just, I don't know. It just, I remember just seeing in training camp saying this is going to be an interesting start to the season, and then they get the mumps, and then they get now this norovirus, and it's just, I don't know. I got off on a tangent there.
I love tangents. That's what podcasts are great for. You can go on a tangent for an hour if you want.
And that's, when look at just the way Ryan Suter's playing lately. It's just, not on top of his game. And when he's not on top of his game, you just know that it's not, it's not the right. I mean, he's such a pro, and to see the way that he played that game in Winnipeg last week. The last game, I got to tell you, I thought he was really good in Columbus. But he took a couple penalties, and one wound up costing him, whether you agree with it or not. And then again, just like the Kemper situation, everybody starts trashing Suter. What's wrong with him? Why is he playing like crap? When you're playing 35, 40 shifts a game, you're gonna probably have a couple bad shifts. And, unfortunately, the way this team is going right now, when he has a bad shift, it's costing him. And because nobody else is doing anything. So, I don't know. It's just, where was I?
I don't know. Well, I want to ask this. Mikko Koivu, I've picked on him plenty of times over the years. He's the team captain. He's even more limited offensively than he used to be. He's not producing much. How do you think he's played this year? Well, and if the answer is not all that well, is he ever going to be good again?
Well, I thought he was playing for a stretch of 12 to 15 games, really, really well. And last game, same thing, is almost a great example of, how just like Kemper's playing great, he makes one mistake, it screws him. Suter's playing great, he makes one mistake, it screws him. I thought Koivu was unbelievable the other night in the first period. In all 3 zones, everything he did was good. And then when they need him in the last 3 minutes of that game, he can't win a draw. He has one turnover, if I remember, that really hurt them. Things like that. So, I mean, it's just again the way the team's going right now. But I mean, Suter's. I mean, Koivu's definitely not the same player he used to be. I always said that, that. Just his speed wise, he was not going to probably age pretty.
Right.
And then he breaks his ankle last year, and he's definitely not nearly as fleet of foot. Obviously he's a lightning rod for criticism right now because everybody loves Zach, and sometimes things are overblown when Koivu's not doing things as well. But it's just. As easy it is for everybody to say trade him, get him off the number one unit, blah, blah, blah. When you look at the way the centers are producing this year, Granlund wasn't good when he was in the lineup. Coyle's been bad. Holla's been bad. Brodziak is Brodziak. Although, again, I think that he gets way too much flack right now from the fans still. But I just think of what this team would look like without Koivu, and I don't think it's a very good team either. I wouldn't trust Granlund going up against Kopitar or right. Jamie Benn or something like that. So, unfortunately, he's one of those guys that, he's probably on the downslope. But right now on this team, if you just don't think about his salary, he's still pretty important for what they're trying to do here. But there is going to become a point, and they have talked about it internally, of when do we trade him? If I had to tell you right now, I don't think he makes the end of his contract. There is going to come a point where maybe you have to try to move him if that's going to get you something. The problem is that he makes a ton of money. I don't think that he's going to be that easily moved either. But this is something they are talking about internally. Because, it's like the old Neil Smith, he once told me, Neil Smith, that, you want to definitely move players. One, you got to trade players before they make, before others realize you made a mistake. And that might be more with some of their young guys. But you also got to trade players before they completely die.
Yeah.
And, there's going to come a point here, and the Wild have had way too unmovable players in the last bunch of years here. The Danny Heatley's of the world and things like that they are going to have to make a real serious assessment here. But you can't trade Mikko unless you figure out a way to get a big top centerman in here. And if Charlie Coyle's not developing into that like they had hoped, then there's, a lot of this is going to be on their young kids. Does Grayovac turn into a stud? Does Coyle, who's been an absolute disappointment this season, does he turn into that? Because you need size up the middle in this league, and right now Mikko is it. In terms of somebody that's performing.
You're depressing me, Michael. This is supposed to be the good team in town this year. This is supposed to be the fun place to come.
Well, it's been disappointing. I mean, it started. It really did start with goaltending. I mean, their goalies haven't been very good, and then when you don't have confidence in your goalies, everything else is going to fall apart. And that's I think partially what's happened here. I mean, there's 1,000 excuses, but if you just look at just some of the goals that they've given up. I mean, this is an organization that has traditionally had great goaltending and made this timely saves and things like that, and really other than maybe that second Colorado game when it was 2-1 and Kemper was unbelievable, or the Philly game where I thought Kemper was outstanding. There just hasn't been a lot of stealing of games this season, and certainly a lot of more losing games.
All right, let's wrap this up with some non-hockey stuff. Did you think of an embarrassing story you want to tell, or you want to save it for next time?
Yeah, I'll save it for next time.
Do you have give me a coffee recommendation, either a brand, a type, or a shop?
Well, I'm really proud of myself. So yesterday I go to Target. I can't believe you asked this. So yes, I guess I always have a coffee story, but yesterday I go to Target. So actually, here's an embarrassing story. So I wake up yesterday morning, and my back is like seized up, and I don't know what the heck. I think it's sitting on all these planes this week, these stupid regional jets. And I took 6 regional jets in a week, and I got another one tomorrow morning. So my back's seized up. So it's New Year's Day, and so I start thinking there's no way I can get a massage today. So I find Massage Envy in Eden Prairie is actually open, so I go for a massage. So I'm leaving there, and I go to Target. So there's the embarrassment that I went for a massage yesterday. So I go to Target across the street, and they have
no happy ending.
No. So there's clearance at the front of Target for the Starbucks Christmas blend. That's like 18 ounces, so huge. Huge bag of
That'll
coffee.
Get you through a couple hours at
least. So it said that it was down from it was originally $13.99, and it was down to $9.79. Okay, This is unbelievable. So I go and I grab this bag of coffee, and it rings up at $6.99. So I go to the
So
cashier.
you bought 18 of them, didn't
I go
you?
to the cashier. I'm like, is it really $6.99 or is that a mistake? And he's looking on there. He goes, no, it's down to $6.99, even though the sign said $9.79 or something. So I'm like, okay. So I went and I put my groceries in the back of the trunk, and I went back into Target. And I cleaned up the shelf of Starbucks Christmas blend. I bought 6 bags of Starbucks Christmas blend coffee at Target yesterday in Eden Prairie. So that was, if you happen to see, I think that's Russo walking out with bags of coffee. That really was me.
TMZ is going to be all over your personal life.
Yeah, I know. Everybody knows I'm a Starbucks guy. I mean, it's like, it's like the other day I was in Winnipeg and Starbucks was closed, and of course I tweeted a picture of it because I was irate. And then
I thought the picture of you breaking in was even better.
And then everybody is like on Twitter's like, hey, you're in Winnipeg, you got to go to Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons sucks. It's horrible coffee. It's like coffee flavored water. I
think McDonald's is better.
I'd walk in a blizzard to go to Starbucks over Tim Hortons if it was right in front of my face. It's terrible. Dunkin' Donuts, who I think is overrated.
I agree with you too. All the East Coast guys, like Christians, is always telling me how great it is.
Yeah,
Starbucks is way
terrible. Even McDonald's coffee is better than Dunkin' Donuts.
I agree with you.
So, coffee in town. I wouldn't say that I've been to a ton of great mom and pop ones. There's a great one in downtown Minneapolis. It's on the northeast side called Terracino.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that was where I used to have my kiss and makeup sit downs with Miko. Miko lived in downtown Minnie, and he and I would get into like 3 or 4 fights a season in the locker room. And he and I would meet at Terracino, and he'd get a blueberry muffin and a coffee, and I'd sit with him and be like, I'm sorry for trashing you in the paper, and he'd apologize for like ripping into me. So, usually those things happened after every Dallas game. Like he and I, I don't know, for some reason, well, not for some reason, the Wilds won 3 times in Dallas since I've been the beat writer. Now 3 times. Before this year actually it was once, and now it's 3 times. For some reason, he and I used to get into brawls in the Dallas locker room. So actually, when Miko moved out of the neighborhood, he joked around. He was like, "We're gonna have to find another place because God knows you and I are gonna still have our blow up." So
I got a place for you.
Yeah,
Moose and Sadie's over on my side of town.
I heard that. Jason Jerosha, the CBS anchor, morning anchor. He actually, I favorited it on my Twitter. I got to look at it. I don't know if it was him that wrote it up or if it was City Pages, but it was a link that he put the other day with great mom and pop type of coffee shops in the area.
Good.
And then there was another one I thought I favorited the other day. That's it's another kind of small coffee brand that I think they sell at like Kowalski's or something that I want to go check out. I'm a coffee holic. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I don't go bar hopping. I go coffee hopping.
I'm telling you, Moose and Sadie's, awesome place, awesome space. Cool
Yeah.
part of the neighborhood. They even let me in there every once.
By the way, last podcast, which was only like 4 or 5 days ago,
true.
I talked about my Phoenix experience where I thought I was having a heart attack and
Yes.
was on I was on the trainer's table next to like Kyle Chipchura after the game, and how the Coyotes doctors recommended that I weed down the coffee and everything. I had 3 or 4 days straight of no chest pain, so I've decided that their advice was stupid. And now I'm
anyone
back
out and bought
now I'm
18
back. Yeah, now
pounds
I'm back on
of Starbucks.
I was a
coffee.
little concerned. So in Columbus, there's a Starbucks attached to the Nationwide Arena, which is an absolute dream and something that I've suggested to Craig Leopold to do. So they have it attached to it. So I thought I was brilliant. So I had, on the way to the morning skate, I had a coffee. And then, no, even worse. I woke up, walked 2 blocks at like 7 a.m., got a coffee at Starbucks. Then I walked to the morning skate, got a coffee. Then I left the arena and went into Starbucks. And then on the way back to the game, I went to Starbucks. So for that day.
But
it was a big to me. It was like the test. It was kind of like my first time, going back to my old ways, and let's see if during the game my heart's going to flutter. And I'm happy to report that there were no chest pains during the Columbus game.
don't ever be a substance abuse counselor. Oh, just go back and drink and see if it's going to work out.
I thought a week
well
straight that was good. So it was awesome though. I mean, you kind of want to hang out at that Starbucks anyway because that's where like all the Wild players go in after between every play.
Yeah, Miko might stop by and yell at you.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I probably shouldn't tell this story. So Matt Cook's in there. I definitely shouldn't tell this story.
But you already started.
I know. Matt Cook, before the game, I was in there getting a Starbucks. So Matt walked in, and it's the same pattern every single game. Like first Every single game. Here's a little tidbit for you for your Wild fans. Every single game, Parisi, Pominville, Niederreiter, and who am I forgetting? Parisi, Pominville, Niederreiter, and
just say Broughton.
Suter. They go to Starbucks together. It's the same thing. I see it on every road trip, especially Parisi. Believe it or not, Parisi, Nino, and Pominville, and Suter on this last one. So Cook, I was going in there. I was pretty much stalking the Starbucks, waiting for Wild players, and so Cook walks in there. So I said to Cook, I'm like, here, let me buy you a Starbucks. Surely the Star Tribune at this point owes you something. so of all people, should I answer this on the phone? It's
sure.
It's Chris Miller.
No, not Chris Miller.
So he orders a tea. I thought that was like Matt Cook drinking a tea. So I'm like, are you sick? No. So he goes, no, I used to get like those, like before games, I get like those 5-6 shot like Americano lattes that I actually drink. But then I'd find out during the game, I'd find that I'd be like, ready, like on edge, like like that.
So that's the reason.
So I said to him, like, that's what you should have always said in your hearings. It's like, blame it on Starbucks.
I love it.
Yeah,
that's great. That's a great story to wrap it up with. That's Mike Russo. You can find him on Twitter at Russo Strip. Go ahead.
There's no doubt that Chris Miller was calling me because it's 4 p.m. He'd like to go home on a Friday, and he wants
you
to be
have to
like,
send your
"Where's
Sunday
Sunday
column?" Well, we just read your Sunday column on the podcast.
Yeah.
Tell them just listen to the podcast and transcribe it.
Yeah.
I'm Jim Souhan. This is SOUHAN-UNFILTERED.com. Michael Russo and I will be doing our own podcast at some point. Right now, you can find everything at SOUHAN-UNFILTERED.com. Thanks to Evan Davis, and we'll be back with another podcast soon.
Looking like a train wreck.